Hey guys, listen, I was just chatting with my good friend and real estate agent, Alan Klein from RPA Real Estate. I almost didn't believe it when he told me that my home value has increased by over 30% since I bought it 2 years ago, and I bet yours has too. Alan said this area has never seen a real estate market like this before, ever. If you're considering selling your home, now is the time to get the maximum money in your pocket. If you'd like to know what your home is worth or have any general real estate questions, call or text Alan Klein today at 570-592-7961. That's 570-592-7961, or visit him online at 570sales.com. Hi, I'm Bill Corcoran Jr., and I'm your host for the On the Stacks podcast. Today, I'm chatting with Alan K. Stout. He is a radio host, journalist, and producer of the Agnes Flood Documentary Project. What's up, podcast? Episode 68 of the On the Stacks podcast in the Blue Door studio. Welcome to the podcast, Alan. How are you?
Great to be here, Bill. I'm fine. Good to see you.
Yeah, you know, it's really an honor to have you on. I mean, you've worked in radio and marketing, and just, you know, you've done so much in your career and in journalism, and it's an honor to have you on and have you on the other side of the mic.
Yeah.
And share a little bit of your story. So we'll get to the music part of your life and the radio and all other stuff. We'll get to that too in the episode. But you also have something else really exciting going on now, the Agnes Documentary Flood Project. So let's start a little bit there.
That's something that's been that I've been working on, believe it or not, Bill, for 12 years. Our original goal for the Agnes documentary was to show it in 2012 for the 40th anniversary of the flood. The flood which destroyed much of the Wyoming Valley in 1972 after Tropical Storm Agnes led to the flooding of the Susquehanna River. And we got a lot of work done back in 2010, 2011. We acquired a lot of the rights for photographs and video, and we got all the local TV stations to give us whatever they had. BRE, NEP, YOU, which was the former WDAU, WVIA, gave us what they had, and we were really on track to hopefully do the film in 2012. But we hit some roadblocks. We hit some funding obstacles at the time. The county wasn't really in a really good place at the time either. That was around the time of Kids for Cash, and the Luzerne County commissioners were getting in trouble all the time, and the FBI set up shop here, so we weren't going to get a lot of help from the county on the project. They had also just funded another little film on the levee system on the River Common. So then there was another flood in 2011.
Yeah.
And we didn't feel comfortable asking people for money to make a movie about a flood when some people just lost their homes. And so obviously the flood in 2011 was not nearly the magnitude of Agnes. But it did hurt people, and it did damage people here in the area, up in Duryea and West Pittston. And so we kind of backed off the movie. And I never got rid of any of the stuff, all the paperwork, all the rights that we had secured, the books that we had acquired, the video, the DVDs. We kept it. And so when some other folks reached out to us last year, Bob Savakinis, who had done some films on Rocky Glen and Angela Park and Hanson's Park. He works with a guy named Tim Novotny, and they're both documentary filmmakers. They said, hey, what's going on with that Agnes movie that you guys tried to do? And we said, well, here's where it's at. 50th anniversary is coming up in 2 years. And so we revisited it last summer, full steam. We've had successful fundraising. We have a GoFundMe page. We have a lot of people in the community behind it. We've already have the FM Kirby Center on hold for June 23rd, 2022 for the 50th anniversary. We've had talks with television broadcasts, and it's going very well. Social media is much better than it was 10 years ago. The GoFundMe things are much more acceptable than they're kind of new then. I know it was suggested to us back then, even like do a Kickstarter. I didn't know what a Kickstarter was in 2010 or 11.
Not a lot of people did.
And so now we kind of have a lot of that back on track, and it's coming together. I've started to write the movie. My job is probably going to be to narrate most of it, write it. I'm the producer, so I'm the guy that mostly did the fundraising, and I'm acquiring all the materials. Couldn't do it without the other gentleman on the team, Tony Brooks, who is a friend of both of ours, and he's like the history man of northeastern Pennsylvania.
He sure is.
Founder of the Wilkes-Barre Preservation Society. He's our historical consultant. Bob and Tim, who I already mentioned. Richard Briggs, who did a great documentary on Agnes back in '97 on the 25th anniversary for WVIA. He's a consultant on the film because we liked what Richard did so much that we wanted him involved. So he was involved early on. But what has never been done before with Agnes, and that's what makes our project unique, is pulling everything together, all of the resources. All of the TV stations at one point did some sort of retrospective on Agnes. WNEP did something in maybe like 82, 10 years later. WBRE did something in 92, 20 years later. VIA did something in 97, 25 years later. I got them all. They gave them to me all on DVD, and I got to see what they did. And what I realized was they all had great stuff that was unique to them because it was theirs. It was from their archives. So if they were going to do a little special on Agnes, they were going to use their stuff. Go out, do some interviews, and use their video and put something together. Put it on TV around June 23rd. What I thought would be interesting was let's see if we could get it all and take the best stuff from all of them instead of just cherry picking. There were 4 great pictorial books on Agnes that were published in 72, 73, you know, a couple months after the flood. They were hardcover, most of them, like 2 of them are hardcover books, like almost like a high school yearbook. Thousands of pictures in those books. We got the rights to use all the pictures from all 4 of them. So we'll cherry pick the best pictures from all of the books. So now all of a sudden we have all the television footage from all the local TV stations, all of the books that were published, rights to use all those pictures. Pick the best ones. Newspapers. They weren't really in any of the documentaries I saw. Well, we had people donating in the newspapers, so we've got those headlines of Susquehanna breaks all records from, you know, the Wyoming Observer, and 80,000 people evacuated from the Times Leader. And so you put those into the mix. Now we've got the newspapers. Now we've got the pictures. Now we've got the video. WARM Radio actually released an album after Agnes, a double vinyl album of radio broadcasts of the evacuation and of helicopters flying over the valley, describing the scenery. And one of the things that's going to be so interesting about our movie, and I think unique about the movie, for example, we've got about 5 or 6 pictures of Myers High School underwater. Aerial shots, one of them, where it looks like the football stadium in the back looks like a big lake. So we've got those pictures, and on the audio of WIRM, we actually have a guy flying over Myers High School describing the scene. And so we can marry those pictures from 1972 with that audio from 1972 of the guy flying over describing what we're going to show you on the screen. So to me, for a documentary film, that's what's going to be special about this movie, is bringing these resources together. And the one thing that I think we're all the most proud of, and we did this back in 2010 or 11, is all of my life I wondered how Agnes was covered nationally. Was this the top story on the 6:30 news that night? You know, you would assume it was because it's a big deal. How did Walter Cronkite talk about Wilkes-Barre? You know, I mean, I always wondered those things. So I reached out to the networks, ABC, NBC, CBS. They all have archive departments. You can request news broadcasts from any date. They have it all. Some of it's black and white, even though it may have aired in color. They archived it in black and white for some reason, even though color TV had been around since mid-'60s, late 60s. But they did have it. And with the help of the downtown Wilkes-Barre Business Association, who made a donation, and at the time the Luzerne County Historical Society, we got it all. And so we have it. And so you have Walter Cronkite opening the 6:30 News, talking about the evacuation in Wilkes-Barre and Kingston and 80,000 people or 100,000 people being displaced. You have John Chancellor talking about how Hurricane Agnes has turned into something more dangerous than anybody had expected. Because these hurricanes, they, you know, you live here, Bill, we hear about them every year. They're down in Florida. They go out to the Gulf. They come up the coast. They fizzle out. You know, they go out to sea. Agnes had a mind of its own. It had a bullseye on the Susquehanna River, it seemed. I mean, it zigzagged. It petered out and then re-fired up again, or I think the Carolinas, and then came right over our direction. You know, upstate New York, the water came down. The levees broke here. It was a perfect storm, so to speak, no pun intended, for our situation, leading to a disaster. It was called at the time by Richard Nixon the worst natural disaster in the history of the United States. And it happened here in our community. Downtown Wilkes-Barre, 9 feet of water. Down in South Wilkes-Barre, people have it on the 2nd floor. Over in Kingston, people have it on the 2nd floor. 2,500 graves unearthed in the 44th Cemetery. You know, people going back to their homes and having coffins in their yards. And a horrible, horrible situation. And we're going to get to that. You know, that we want people to see these photographs of the rising river, the gallant effort that was made to stop it. You know, I'm sure you've seen pictures of the sandbaggers. I mean, people were over by the Market Street Bridge in Kingston on both sides of the bridge and down towards Wilkes College and in Plymouth and in 44 sandbagging, trying to prevent this flood from happening. And they stayed till the last minute. I mean, we have one photograph of people running as it broke and their feet are splashing in the water. So that's heroic and that's admirable. And the way that people fought back afterwards. You know, you go back to your house for 5-6 days later, because, you know, the whole flood, it didn't last that long. I mean, water came in, water receded. I stayed at my relatives up towards Hanover Township. I was in South Wilkes-Barre at the time with my mom. We got hammered down there. But when you came back to your home a week or so later, the devastation was unbelievable. That's another thing about our documentary that I think is going to make it hopefully unique. There's a great man named Dr. Massari, Dr. Tony Massari. He was a professor at King's College, and he wrote the book on the flood, Appointment with Disaster, The Swelling of the Flood. So I reached out to Doc when we first started trying to make the movie back in 2010. And he also made documentary films. And I asked him if he would like to be involved with the project. And he had been retired at the time. He was delighted to hear from me. And he was very helpful in the beginning. But I like to tell people this story because it shows the direction of our movie, our documentary. Doc said to me on the phone one night, he said, "Alan, you're not going to be able to recreate the emotion that people had when they went back to their home. If someone's sitting on their porch 40 years later and the house has been fixed up for 38 years and they're reflecting on it, they're going to talk to you about it. But that raw emotion that people had when they went back and they saw the loss and the devastation, you can't recreate it." Doc had not seen at that point the 19 DVDs that I had acquired. And I said to him, "Doc, we don't have to recreate it. We have it. I have tons of interviews on video of people standing in front of their house being interviewed the day they went back, weeping, shocked, trying to get their head around it. Interviews with people in the following weeks as, you know, the recovery effort began and the federal government got involved and the trailers came and, you know, we had Max Rosen, the judge with the Flood Recovery Task Force, and Mia Mathewson with the community group of people, and Congressman Flood, who famously said, "This is one flood versus another now," you know, and all that leadership, and all, and Watergate's hanging over. I mean, Nixon didn't even come until September. You know, people say, "Well, the president came, it was a big deal." Now today, if there's a tornado or an earthquake and the president's not down there in a day, he gets criticized. But yeah. President Nixon didn't come till, I think we were on Labor Day. 2 months almost, right? So more than 2 months. But he came. And the people were happy that he came, and he was a good cheerleader, and he gave everybody a good pep talk and told everybody he was proud of them. And we have all that on tape too.
Yeah.
And so that's all going to be in there.
How old were you when this happened?
I was about 5. And I think that might be one of the reasons that I wanted to do the documentary. We all start remembering things around kindergarten. You probably remember your kindergarten teacher's name. But go back a year before that, you don't really have much. There's something about that age where the memories retain.
I was going to say, so like, what kind of memories do you have?
Oh, I have a lot. I remember my mother waking me up in the morning and saying we had to leave. And we lived on Carlisle Street in South Wilkes-Barre, second floor apartment. It was just her and me at the time. My mom later remarried when I was 11. When I was about 10. But she was a single mom from around, maybe it was 4 till, there was about 6, 7 years where it was just me and my mom. And she's great. And she's a great mother and strong person. And she woke me up and said, we got to go. I remember sirens blaring. And we headed up to my cousin's house up in the top of Lee Park. There's a little alley called Little Street, and there's a street called Strand Street. If you go up South Main Street in Wilkes-Barre, everybody knows there's that big, beautiful Lutheran church with the big metal cross. You know what I'm talking about? It's
Yep.
not 2 miles from here.
You're pointing.
Yeah. That's where I stayed, right across the street from the church. And that's another one of my memories. There's this big field next to that church. It's still there. It must be 150 yards of just grass. That was like an airport that summer. Helicopters landing in that field all the time, dropping off clothes for people and supplies. So this is what I'm looking at. Helicopters buzzing overhead, military vehicles, army trucks, like a martial law type situation for a while. And as a 5-year-old, not understanding the heartache, not understanding the loss, it was almost exciting. Oh, I get to sleep over my cousins also. It was like a big sleepover. I had cousins who were a couple years older than me, and they were like kind of big brother figures, and we stayed at their house. It seemed like all summer long. Choppers flying overhead, cool army trucks buzzing down the streets. When I got older, it kind of hit me more that, wow, well, there was nothing fun about it for anybody. Going back to our house on Carlisle Street, I remember going up to the second floor where my mom and I lived, and the floors were buckled, like triangular, like they were, the hardwood floors actually buckled to these points where you could actually trip walking across the room. And that was on the second floor. And drive by there today and look at that apartment where it was. When we first started making the movie, I took a drive down there. I'm like, man, that water was high. That's unbelievable. Going back to my grandparents' house, the television set was like that old floor model TV set. It was like a piece of furniture, heavy, turned right upside down. Standing on my grandparents' front porch, my grandfather had, like, imagine it's 1972. Imagine, he had his chair. Like, my grandmother and grandfather literally, like on All in the Family, had their 2 chairs in the living room in front of the TV set that was the piece of furniture. It was a kind of an All in the Family kind of living room. And I remember seeing all those things, my grandfather's chair particularly being picked up by a bulldozer and being dumped into the back of a dump truck in front of his house, his favorite chair. He was retired at that point. He had worked. He was a coal miner. He had black lung. This was supposed to be the time in his life when he could sit on the front porch and relax, and now he's got to go through this. These are the things that all hit me later. My mother's bravery, taking care of her little boy. I remember she told me that her sister lived down outside of Philadelphia, and there were no phone service. Nobody had cell phones back then, and I guess the power lines were out. The Bell Telephone was down here on Northampton Street, I think, at the time. And so she drove to Blakesley, which is, a little bit of a hoof from here, to Blakesley Corners to use a payphone. And I guess stood in line for hours to call, I think she called her sister and my father to tell them that we were okay and where we were. And so these stories, some of them were told to me later, some of them I remember personally, like most of them I've just told you. These sprinkler trucks would come down the street. The most enormous trucks I've ever seen to this day. I mean, the tire on this truck, these trucks must have been 6 feet tall. The enormous power, they would power wash the streets, and we would get excited. All the kids would, oh, the sprinkler's coming, the sprinkler's coming, and we'd run out and watch these things come down. To this day, I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen one of those trucks again since then. And so it did leave a strong impression, even the smell. You know, everybody talks about the flood mud. It's real. It was everywhere, and it took a while to go away.
A lot of it's probably still around.
Yeah. You hear people working on the movie. I enjoy hearing people's stories. We have a Facebook page. It's Agnes Flood Documentary Project, and people will comment all the time. And yeah, I was just working down in my basement. I ripped the paneling out that my dad put up after the flood. I found a whole bunch of flood mud. You know, you hear those stories all the time.
Still today.
Yeah. It's dried up back there. You know, it's not really dangerous. It's just dirt. It's just earth. You know, I mean, it was properly cleaned and covered at the time, so I guess there's been no problems with it. But still there in some of the nooks and crannies of these homes, that so many of them. I mean, all of Kingston. There's like 10 houses in Kingston that were not affected. And my dad, my stepfather, I call him my dad, he raised me really. His house wasn't affected up on Grove Street, but most of them were. And South Wilkes-Barre, Hanover Township, Lee Park, Plymouth, Edwardsville, good portion of Wilkes-Barre, downtown, South Wilkes-Barre, the Heights, no, North End, really no, but most of it. And so everybody has a story. Yeah. And we want to tell that story. And the reason is kind of twofold. You know, why are you making the documentary? I mean, well, first of all, like I said, we want to pull everything together. There have been nice ones that have been done before by NEP and BRE and VIA. And they've all been kind enough to give us their stuff and say, hey, take it. We like the idea of you doing one that has everything in it. That was nice. They could not have done that. They could have said, no, we're going to do it. You know, that's ours. You know, no, they didn't want any money. They just give them a film credit at the end. Special thanks to the people that wrote some of the people that published the books. The photographers have obviously passed away. I mean, it's 50 years ago. So if they were in their 40s or 50s when they were taking these pictures, they might be long gone. But we got in touch with their kids, you know, and they said, you know, my dad would be proud to have his pictures in the documentary, or thank you. You know, we'll make sure to credit you at the end, taken from the book, The Wrath of Agnes, or The Trouble with Agnes, or The Great Flood of 72, or Portrait of Agnes. You know, we have them all. They'll all be there, credited, and they're a part of it. We couldn't do it without them. The work that they did 50 years ago here, 50 years later, is going to be on a big screen at the FM Kirby Center. And I'm happy for them, those people and those families. We really also want to honor those people that fought through it. For me, it would be my parents and my grandparents. The resiliency that they showed, you know, the valley with a heart, that sort of expression was coined around Agnes. We still use it today when we describe our community, the way they pulled together. That's part of it. But equally important is people that don't remember at all. I want you to see it, Bill.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
I want you to be at the FM. I'm inviting you right now. Will you come to the Kirby Center on June 23rd, 2022?
I'll mark my calendar.
All right. Because when we first showed the trailer to people that were younger than Agnes, people in their 20s or 30s, people that were too young to remember it, the reactions were kind of exactly what I was hoping for, because some of these buildings haven't changed. Churches look the same. So you see St. Nicholas Church over there on Pennsylvania Boulevard, yep. And St. Aloysius Church down in South Wilkes-Barre. That's my church. The post office, which was new at the time, it was a brand new post office. We got a shot of a guy driving by the post office in a boat, where all you could see is the top of the post office, but you could still see that circle logo on the side of the building. Yeah. And when you see these buildings in color, It's not something that happened 200 years ago. This is something that happened in your parents' or grandparents' lifetime. And you see it, they go, wow. I mean, the one guy at the Times Leader, I was still working at the Times Leader when we started the project, and I showed it to the one younger fella. I said, hey, check this out. And he's like, that's Boscov's. That's Boscov's underwater. I'm like, yeah, it was way underwater, actually. It was called the Boston Store at the time, but the building looks exactly the same. The FM Kirby Center was the Paramount Theater. We have video of a guy driving by in a boat with the words Clockwork Orange. The Clockwork Orange was the movie on the marquee, but there it is. There's the front of the Kirby Center under, 10 feet of water. And so when younger people see these clips, they're learning something about their community that maybe they heard of. Of course, they heard of the flood. You can't grow up around here and not hear it. And that's another thing. We don't even call it Agnes. It's just the flood. And you'll hear people talk about before the flood, after the flood. Well, before the flood, our business, I think you told me that when we were talking about it.
I did.
Before the flood, we were down.
Yep.
You didn't say before Agnes.
I just said before the flood.
Before the flood. And so it's a part of our culture here that the younger people have heard their whole life. And we're going to show it to them.
Yeah. What is it about this documentary, personally, for you, that's so important?
I think it was what I just said. Preserve it, pull it all together, make it a little more definitive than anything that's been done before. Take our time with it. Everything from the formation of the hurricane down in the tropics to the sandbagging efforts to I scanned in 300 pictures from the books of about 100 of them were just houses, just knocked off their foundations. I want people to see this. This might be on your street if you live down around Riverside Drive area. The levee broke in 2 places really badly, down in 44 at the cemetery and right around the bend where Dorothy Dick Center is at Wilkes University. And so those neighborhoods got it. Not only did some of the neighborhoods it filled in, the water rose up, and like where my grandparents lived, still strong enough to flip over a television set and knock things down. But the closer you were to the river, obviously, the more destruction it was, and you'll literally see. We have a picture of you go back to where the house was, and all you see is the hole for the basement. That's it. The house is gone. There's nothing. Who knows where it is? Downriver somewhere, or pieces of it are all over Wilkes-Barre, South Wilkes-Barre. So I want people to see that. I want people to maybe they'll be prideful too of their community. You go down to New Orleans today, and there's a lot of pride there. I haven't, they're proud that they bounced back from Katrina. There are people that thought they shouldn't even bother. Oh, it's a fishbowl. It's going to happen again. Why should we invest this money? And the people said, no, this is our town. We live here. We're fixing it. And they did that here. And it's important for young people to know that.
Yeah. What about maybe some more memories like from your mom?
Well, I said she told me the story of making that phone call and coming back. And I mean, one of them's even funny. We lived on a 2nd floor apartment, and you could just throw stuff out your front windows because everything was just going into the garbage. So there's no need to walk down 3 flights of stairs with a broken chair or something because it was going out to the curb anyway. And so I guess people were just tossing stuff out of 2nd floors and everything. There was no porch or anything on this apartment. It was just flat down. So she told me she was dumping out a bag of sugar that she did not want to keep. I don't even think it was in the flood. It was just on the shelf. It was out of but just because the flood water was near it, obviously we're getting rid of the food. Nothing. We're not keeping anything.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I guess she dumped it out the front window, and I think it was my cousin Joey was standing underneath it.
I knew this is where this is going.
He got a head full of flour or sugar or something, just like you'd see in a movie.
Yeah.
Like a slapstick kind of comedy. And so it was laughed off, of course. It didn't hurt anybody, but she used to laugh when she told me that story. She was really happy that we were working on this documentary. She passed away 6 years ago. And I guess I always imagined her being there that night. She won't be physically, but she motivates me in making it too, because she was the one I was with. So my memories are with her.
Yeah.
So, that's not unique to me. Everybody has them. Their parents, their grandparents, where were they? And the stories we hear. I mean, some of the people that have reached out to us were involved with the in 40 Fort, those bodies. And we have pictures too of military trucks with vaults on them that people were washed away, and they reburied these people out in Carverton, out towards Harding, at the cemetery out there, Memorial Shrine Cemetery. And they had to do it quickly. You can't just, so they didn't identify the people. So it's just a mass grave out there with the one marker on it for 2,500 people. And we've had people reach out to us, and they were involved with that. So gruesome detail that had to be done. And people did it. And they're still here to so, I mean, you hear these stories from everybody has one. Mine are from the vantage point of a child, kind of being oohed and awed by the helicopters and the military trucks and the sprinklers, and having a good time with the big sleepover at my cousin's house, sleeping in a sleeping bag in the living room. It seemed like all summer long, but also remembering the heartache of seeing my grandfather's things being dumped in the back of a bulldozer.
Yeah. Are you guys still looking for support, like financially?
We are. Now, we set a budget of X amount of dollars, and the day that we're taping this podcast, we're at 60%. The community's been great. We got all 5 of the colleges. So we have Wilkes, Kings, Penn State Wilkes-Barre, LCC, Misericordia. Some of our elected leaders, State Senator Udicek, State Senator Lisa Baker, Aaron Coffer, Eddie Daperchinsky, they all made donations. And that's nice. That's reputable people in the community and leaders in the community, businesses, the Miracle Foundation, Fellerman and Ceramboni Law Firm. You see those guys all over the news all the time. They do great work with the kids, trying to teach them not to drink and drive around prom. They're community-oriented guys. They became a sponsor. Some of the banks, little mom and pop shops, individuals.
I was gonna say, can somebody like myself donate?
Absolutely, on the GoFundMe page. It's interesting because the GoFundMe page is, like I said, we have 20,000 followers on Facebook. I did post this. I said, if everybody gave us $2, we can make the movie. But you know how the algorithms work. I mean, it's a Facebook page, so not 20,000 people don't see the post.
Yeah.
You could pay for the post, and 20,000 people aren't going to see the post. So, we find most of the donations are $20, $25, $10. It all adds up. And so between the community sponsors and the GoFundMe, we're going to get there. And what we need it for is the licensing of some of the stuff. We also want to make it a timepiece type documentary where we maybe put in some of the music from 1972. I mean, I remember seeing the Vietnam films when I was a teenager, and they first start making movies about Vietnam, and they're playing, The Doors and Jimi Hendrix and Creedence Clearwater Revival, and I knew those songs from classic rock radio, and those songs made it feel more modern to me in some way. Oh wow, the guys in Vietnam are listening to the Doors. I like the Doors, or I like Creedence, and so when you put, some of the, everybody loves Led Zeppelin, Stairway to Heaven. That song's a year older than Agnes. You think about it. And so I thought if we could put some of those songs into the documentary, that it would give it a sense of place, and it might resonate with younger people even more. Oh, wow, Neil Young's Heart of Gold was a big hit in 72, or Steely Dan, Do It Again, Horse with No Name from America. So you got to license that. And obviously, we're a nonprofit project working with the Wilkes-Barre Preservation Society, and it's educational, and we want to show it in schools. So when we get to dealing with the record labels, we're going to hope maybe they give us a break on some of that, but we don't expect to get it for free. And the network stuff you have to license too, and that could be pretty expensive. The stuff that we got from the Walter Cronkite, John Chancellor, NBC, ABC, CBS material is on a screener. So right now it has a time code on it and so forth. And we had the right to kind of show it in our trailer a little bit and get an idea of how we would use it in the movie. But if we want to put it in there and distribute it and put it on a big screen in a theater, we have to properly license that stuff. And same approach, I'm going to try to present it to them as a community project and see if we can get some breaks on it. But we're not just going to put it in there. That would be unethical and illegal. And so that's where the funding comes in, and some production costs too, because most of us are working on a volunteer basis, but the editing is going to be tremendous with 400 pictures and interviews and 19 DVDs. And so there's going to be some costs there as well.
Yeah. So it's being shown at the Kirby Center. After it airs at the Kirby Center, how can somebody else see it?
As of this recording that we're taping this, we're in discussions with WVIA.
Okay.
They like the concept. We've had 2 Zoom meetings already with those folks. They know we like their 97 documentary. It was 60 minutes long. We're thinking about making ours 90, building on it, using some of their material, video, which is from the TV stations anyway, so we have it from another source. But obviously that's a goal, and to take it to schools. I would love to have some assemblies. Obviously we can't do it in June because the kids will be out, but maybe that September or October of 2022, take it to Valley West, Wilkes-Barre area, Pittston area, West Pittston, Wyoming area, the schools that were in the flood, so that those kids can see the movie.
Yeah,
and that's something that I want to do. I already talked to my principal at my kid's school, Good Shepherd Academy over in Kingston. I got 3 pictures of that school underwater. It was Bishop O'Reilly High School at the time, and Holy Redeemer. That school was being built during the flood, I believe. I think it was under construction during Agnes.
Oh, wow.
It's a great looking school still, beautiful. So that has some history there. So to show that in that, you show this movie in these high school auditoriums or gymnasiums, and you tell the kids, 50 years ago, you were under 12 feet of water where you're sitting right now, and I want to do that.
Yeah.
That's part of the plan.
It's impactful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about music and adding some music, and I think we're gonna in a moment here where I think we're gonna transition a little bit to your career as a journalist.
Sure.
and your passion for music. But before we do, how can somebody else learn a little bit more about the Agnes Flood documentary if they want to learn more some right now?
Agnes72.com. Easy to remember. All the information is there. There's 6 videos there. You can see the film trailers, the objectives, radio appearances that we've done, newspaper articles that are about the project, the film team, a link to the Facebook page, a link to the GoFundMe. It's all right there. Agnes72.com.
There it is. And really looking forward to the documentary.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're very passionate about it, and I think it's going to show in your work.
I hope so, and not just me, but the other guys as well, Tim and Bob and Tony and Richard.
Yeah, really cool. So let's talk a little bit now about Alan K. Stout, the journalist.
The K.
The K. It's all about the K, right?
I told you the story of the K. Can I tell you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I tell the audience?
Yeah, because I just heard this 10 minutes ago before we started. So
because I think you or Darren called me that. And
yeah.
I said, look, here's the deal. When I first started writing for the newspaper, I wrote maybe 20 stories or so. I didn't use my middle initial, and my name is short, Alan Stout. It has no vibe. It's not like a cool long Italian last name where there's a lot of vowels and syllables and stuff. I mean, at least you have Bill Corcoran. There's a little bounce there. I got nothing.
Just abrupt.
So, yeah, it's abrupt. So I thought, I'm just throw my initial in on my byline for the newspaper. That's it. And that was it. I put it in there. You know, when I introduced myself to be, hi, I'm Alan Stout. How are you? Nice to meet you. You know, book authors, you'll notice they use their middle initials sometimes, and so I didn't really think anything of it. And then it kind of became my nickname. People would call me Alan K, or they'd call me AKS. It's a cool nickname. I like it. So, okay, it developed naturally.
Yeah, it became like part of your brand.
I didn't give myself a nickname. I just was throwing an initial. And then the funny part was, though, I started doing a radio show. Oh, gosh, 12 years after I was writing. So I started writing for the Times Leader in 92. Didn't launch the radio show till 2004. And I was on The Mountain for 9 years. And I always said, Alan Stout. Everybody, Alan Stout here with you Sunday nights, 9 to 10, music on the menu, local artists. And that's how I would introduce myself on the show. So The Mountain changes formats. I think it was 2012 or 13. And they went to All Sports, and the River called and asked me if I wanted to come. I was still doing an internet show for Mountain for a couple months, but it's not the same as being on the air. I mean, you want to be on the radio airwaves. That's where people hear the music. So for music, I mean, I thought they offered. They said, you want to come over and be with us? And so I went over and I did a couple shows on the River. I really didn't change anything. Still my show. It was local bands, my host. And the program director says to me, Alan, why aren't you using your name when you do your show? And I say, what do you mean? He goes like, you don't say Alan K. Stout when you open the show. I'm like, oh, well, I don't call myself that. Like that's my byline in the newspaper, you know? And he's like, oh, that's your brand. That's how people know you from music. All those years writing stories. And I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking, you want me to call myself that? You know, so, but he did. And so I got used to it. And so now when I open my show every Sunday night, it's everybody, Alan K. Stout with you, music on the menu. But there was always this part of me that thought there would be like some sort of pompousness to it. Like, I imagine like, you know, George Hamilton with the tan and a tuxedo walking around going, hi, I'm Alan K. Stout. You know, how are you? You know, and so anybody that knows me, you know, that's not my personality at all. But it's my byline in the newspaper still when I write some stories, and I use it on the radio, and it kind of became my nickname. So, and, you know, it's my middle name is Kent. So it's kind of an unusual middle name. And so that's where it comes from. So,
yeah.
But yeah, if people say, hey, Alan K or AKS, it's cool.
Yeah.
But it just because I thought my name was abrupt, as you said.
Yeah.
No, that's it.
Yeah. So you've done some really cool interviews. I mean, David Bowie, Sting, Eddie Van Halen, Kiss, Bon Jovi, Aerosmith, just to name a few. How did that all get started?
I'll tell you how it got started. I'll give my friend Joe Warren credit. Joe Warren is my best friend since high school. He is my son's godfather. We're both busy guys now. We probably don't get together for lunch a couple times a year, maybe around the holidays. You know how it is. But, you know, we're always a phone call away. Joe had a show at King's College when we were in college. And I used to sit in with Joe and do the show with him on Saturdays sometimes. And Joe thought big when he was at King's. We did interviews. Bon Jovi came to Rocky Glen. They were an up-and-coming band. Joe and I did an interview. I was 17 years old. I'm interviewing John Bon Jovi for WRKC, King's College.
That was your first interview?
Yeah.
At 17 years old?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
We had Eric Carr from Kiss call in one time. We did Vinnie Vincent from Kiss when he opened for Alice Cooper. We interviewed him over at the Ramada on Public Square. He gave us a ride over. That was funny. He has a tour bus in front of the Ramada on the square, and we have our cars there. And former lead guitarist from Kiss goes, you guys need a ride to the show? And we looked at each other like, Yeah.
Yeah, we do, actually.
We didn't, but it was like 2 miles from the Ramada over to the Army, but we rode over the Market Street Bridge.
In style.
With Vinnie Vincent, and he showed us his new video that was on MTV on the bus. And so I did all that stuff when I was 17, 18 years old.
That's so cool.
So, yeah, so you go over to the Times Leader, and I just thought that way. Okay, well, I really wanted to cover local music. It was amazing live music scene with venues. There's still talented live music scene, and there's still great musicians and songwriters, and there's still wonderful artists and bands. But back then, people went out more. The iPhone has been such a big part of people's social life now. It's how they meet people to date, and that's how they plan. The old days, you had to go out. You want to meet some people, you got to go out. And so everybody went out, and so they went out to see music. So I was in the middle of all that. I'm in my 20s, and I'm covering bands in the clubs, and the Montage Amphitheater opens in '94, and the Kirby Center had already been fixed up for a couple of years, and then they start making plans to build the arena, and I get involved in the Arena Yes movement. And so at that point, I'm the music writer for the Times Leader, and we've got a great live music scene. We've got great local bands. We have an amazing band called the Badleys, which inspired me in so many ways. We could talk about that in a minute. But the national acts are coming through all the time, and I kind of knew how to get them.
Yeah, how?
Work with the labels and the publicists. You make a pitch. You say, my name is Alan Stout. I'm music writer. Alan K. Right. That was important. That's how I got the interviews, actually.
I knew it.
But, you tell them we are the #1 circulation in Luzerne County. This will run on the Sunday Arts and Leisure section, 75,000 subscribers, 125,000 readers. I also... Well, our paper got bought by a company called Night Raider in '97. And I think a lot of the people in the newsroom and the paper were probably nervous because anytime you get bought, you don't know what you're in for. And I understood that, but I was excited because I knew that they were a syndicated wire service and that I could maybe contribute. And so I could tell the publicist for Steven Tyler, Aerosmith is coming to Montage. I'm requesting an interview with Steven Tyler. It will be the front page feature story on the Friday entertainment section or the Sunday arts and leisure section. It will reach 75,000 readers or 125,000. It is a #1 circulation newspaper in northeastern Pennsylvania or Luzerne County. And I could put it on the wire and it could be available to hundreds of other newspapers across the country. Give me Steven Tyler for 20 minutes and that's what I could do for you. And I was successful with that. And so we got great interviews, which our readers loved. They knew to pick up the Times Leader a couple days before the show because we were going to have an interview with David Crosby or Don Henley or Bon Jovi or Eddie Van Halen was one of the early ones I did, where I think even my editors looked at me like, whoa, who's this kid? How'd you get Eddie Van Halen? Well, I went through Warner Brothers Records. I also took a day off early in my career from work, and I went to New York, and I went to them all.
We went to the record labels?
The labels, yeah. I went to Atlantic, I went to Mercury, I went to Virgin, Capitol, Warner Brothers. All the people that I was starting to build a relationship with as a music journalist, I just popped in to say hello. I told them I was coming into town, and they said, oh, yeah, Alan, stop by. It'd be nice to meet you, and I did. And they gave me a little tour. I remember walking down the hallway of Mercury Records, and they had, their Hall of Fame. Big posters like you'd see outside a movie theater, kind of in framed lights, and it was John Mellencamp and Bon Jovi and the Scorpions and Kiss and Bryan Adams may have been on the label. And no, he was on A&M, I think. But it was just kind of magical. You're in the Capitol Records and the same logo that's on some of the Beatles records. And so it was fun, and I think it maybe helped too. You were trying to establish yourself as somebody that they would know, that they were familiar with. Another thing I did, no one ever taught me this, maybe it's just good upbringing, but no one ever told me to do it. But whenever I got an interview with one of those artists, I mailed a copy of the story to the publicist with a thank you letter. maybe on the Times Leader stationery. Maybe I even hand wrote it on the stationery, make it more personal. But thanks so much for the interview with Stephen. I appreciate it. Here's a copy. Knowing full well, even as a 20-something at the time, that person has a boss.
Yeah, make them look good.
That person asked, hey, what did you do? Oh, here, I got this feature story in Scranton Wilkes-Barre for the Aerosmith show. And that even gets back to the artist. Because the artist is paying somebody. Sometimes they have an individual publicist outside the label. So the publicist probably sits down with the artist once a month.
And says, what are you doing?
What are you doing? Oh, here, let me show you these clips that came in. Oh, what was this one from? Big color feature. Oh,
who's Alan K. Stout?
Yeah, Times Leader. Oh, that's the Wilkes-Barre show, right? The amphitheater. Yeah. So I knew all this was happening. No one ever told me, and it made them happy.
That's cool.
They got something to show their boss, and I got to give something to our readers, which I knew made them happy. So it was wonderful.
That's really cool.
A great time of my life. And then the music side of it, the local side, the cover band scene was fun. I know some people knock cover bands. I always say, look, the Philharmonic's a cover band. They're just playing Bach and Beethoven instead of Led Zeppelin and, the Rolling Stones or whoever they are.
Yeah.
They really are. So there's nothing wrong with that. And those clubs, those cover bands were so popular, they make so many people in on the weekends back then. I'm talking 500-600 people on a Friday or Saturday night, that the clubs had enough money to do an original music night on a Wednesday or so. And so you have a band like the Badleys over at Jitterbugs bust right through because they were blowing everybody away. And they were doing it with their own songs. But because a woman like Lynn Carey, who owned the club, had good money coming in on Saturday and Friday night, she could try something cool on Wednesday night. And so it all worked together. And it was fun to kind of write about all of it.
Yeah. Did you, were you able to build some relationships with some of these artists? Like, do they remember you after you wrote maybe the first, second, third story about them?
The one that comes to mind the most would be Paul Stanley. I'm a big Kiss fan. I got a rose on my arm.
Say you got a matching tattoo.
I
with
do.
Him, don't you?
Yeah. I have a picture of him and I holding our arms together. He actually said, "Man, I got to get mine filled in because mine was
a little worn out.
His was worn out. Now his is newer. I got to get mine filled in." But I mean, last year or not, 2019, right before COVID, I took my son down to Philly to see Kiss on the end of the road tour, and I know the guy that works for the band, and they needed someone to write about their backstage experience that they were selling to fans. It's very expensive, it was like $6,000, and it was major though. I mean, you were backstage for hours. You went on the stage. You sat behind the drum kit. You held the guitars. They fed you. The band came out, and it wasn't the quick meet and greet. They hung out. You signed stuff, pictures, individual. So they needed someone to write about this. The people that package these tours. So he asked me. He said, "Could you write about this?" I said, he goes, I'll put you and your son on the tour. All you got to do is write something about it later. Sounds good. So we went down and had a wonderful time. My son did all those things. He's holding Gene Simmons' torch and fire-breathing torch and his guitars. And Paul Stanley comes back and said hello to him and looks at my son and kind of puts his hand on my shoulder and says, "I've known your dad a long time. Your dad's a good guy." And my son's looking up at him. He's Paul Stanley. He's in full makeup and the platforms. He's literally, this is not long before he's going on stage. He's ready to roll. And that was awesome. I mean, just to have that experience with my son and to have him remember. I mean, he signed something for me once, an article about him that I wrote. That's my thing. Like, I have the article signed.
Yeah. Talk about a little bit about that in a minute too.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing. If you interview these artists on the phone and before they come into town, sometimes they will ask you, "Are you coming to the show?" Well, I was going to the show. I was going to be covering the show. So I would say, "Yeah, I'm coming." Well, make sure you come back and say hello. And if they invited me, sometimes if I was a big fan, I would go. And I would bring them a copy of the story because it already ran in the paper.
Right. So you'd bring the physical newspaper with you.
Bring the physical news and say, "Hey, I'm Alan K-Stout."
Yeah.
I'd say,
I wrote this article.
I'm the guy that you talked to on the phone last week. Thank you for your time. I brought you a copy, and they appreciated that. And they'd stand there and they'd be looking at it. And then I said, "Would you sign one for me?" So rather than getting a CD cover or an album cover or a poster or something signed or a little black and white glossy, they signed my stories. So that's what I kind of have in my house now. In my basement, I have like a little rock and roll bar, and that's my memorabilia. Is like,
and you transplanted it here today.
I brought some of it over because you said bring some props. So,
Yeah.
and that's kind of a neat part of that experience too. Getting back to your question though, I'd say no. You know, most of the people, you interviewed them a couple of times. They do a lot of interviews a year. They're nice to you because, you know, you did a nice job with the story. They're happy to sign it so as a picture, but you don't get any kind of recognition with them. Maybe if you do a couple of interviews. I interviewed Greg Allman a couple of times within a couple of years, or I think Joe Perry, where they might remember talking to you. Like John Bon Jovi. I had a nice relationship with John because I interviewed him in 85 and interviewed him a couple times after that. And I remember after one of the interviews, it's actually on the tape on YouTube, he just said, always great talking to you, Alan. Like, so there was some familiarity there.
Yeah, it's personal.
And that's cool. That is cool. Locally, the band that I probably got the closest with as friends were the guys in the Badleys. I think I wrote 45 stories about the Badleys, right from the very beginning, through the record deal, through all the chaos with the record label, through almost a breakup, through getting back together, solo projects, the opening of the recording studio. You know, when they opened up for Robert Plant and Jimmy Page, the Times leader sent me up to Buffalo to cover the show. When they were recording an album for A&M Records, Atlas, Polydor Records, the Times leader sent me up to the studio in Bearsville. I spent a couple of days in the studio with the guys. So that was a relationship that very organically, I didn't know the guys. I fell in love with the music, period. Absolutely thought that they were some of the most amazing songs I've ever heard. And then over the course of the next year or two, got to know the guys personally through all the interviews, to eventually all being the same age and living around here for the most part, friendship. And that's one of the special things in my career with music journalism, probably is that band.
I was going to say, like, why music?
Oh. You know, it goes back to those early memories we talked about, you know, not necessarily with Agnes, but my mom was a single mom for 6 years, so she worked, so my grandfather was retired, so she dropped me off at his house. And talk about not getting, remember I said not what you bargained for? You know, 70, you know, man's up 72 years old or whatever it was, and he's
supposed to be retired,
dealing with a flood.
Yeah.
Oh, and mom wants to know, his daughter, can you watch Alan like every day? And he said, I guess. So I was with him all the time, all day long. In the summer, I was there all day. And then on school days, I was there from about 3 to 5 o'clock. My school was down the street from his house. My grandmother was still working a little bit, so I was more with my grandpa. And he was a music guy. I mean, big stereo, like a floor model, and he belonged to the record club, and he liked Elvis, which is interesting because I thought about this when I was later. He was not a teenager when Elvis came out. When Elvis came out in 1956, my grandfather was probably like in his late 40s. So a lot of those guys were poo-ha in this new rock and roll stuff. But I guess my grandpa was cool.
He was hip.
Yeah, because he loved Elvis Presley. And we listened to Elvis Presley all the time. And then, you know, you get into the Monkees, reruns on TV was you know, there's music. And then Kiss came out, and they were just larger than life to kids in the 70s. It's hard for somebody to even imagine how huge Kiss was in 1977. There was mystique to them. No one even knew what they looked like. The songs were great. And that's the formation. So you got, you know, Elvis when you're a kid and when you're a little boy, and Kiss is your first favorite rock band. And top 40 radio in the 70s was fantastic. It's diverse, everything from Jim Croce's on the radio to the Bee Gees and then you get to be a teenager. And I guess for me, that's when it really kicked in, because I started going to rock concerts pretty young. My parents took me to see The Who and The Clash. I mean, they didn't take me. They dropped me off with my friend. And they took my little sister around to I think they went to the Philadelphia Zoo. They dropped me off at JFK Stadium. 100,000 people with The Who and The Clash and Santana on the bill. I'm 50. I just turned 15. It was a couple days after my 15th birthday, and that was it. That was the baptism by fire. I mean, that day changed my life. It's like the power of rock and roll, the beauty of rock and roll, the sense of communion that it could bring with 100,000 people all enjoying and singing a song, pumping their arms in unison to Bob O'Reilly. Powerful day in my life. That led to wanting to go to more concerts. And so I'm in high school and I'm going out. Then we didn't have the arena then. We didn't have the amphitheater. So we'd go on these bus trips. March would run trips where you get your ticket and your transportation for like $40, believe it or not. And that's how we saw Van Halen and Springsteen and we started going to see Kiss. And the journalism, I think, probably came from reading too. Once I got so into music, I wanted to know everything about music. That's kind of how I am with, like, if I'm in, my friend Joe said that to me, but Alan, if you don't like something, you don't give a damn about it. But if you like it, you want to know everything about it. That's probably one of the best analyses anyone ever made of me. And so I'm that way with sports, with my Yankees. I could tell you everything about every era of the team, all the players, the managers, the championships. I read all the books, the biographies. With music, I would buy the mag. I would know what day they were coming out. I'd be at the supermarket knowing that Hip Parader was coming out or Circus Magazine was coming out. I would have lunch at Wyoming Valley West High School with my friends. We had a 40-minute lunch. I'd hang out with the guys for 30 minutes, have lunch, enjoy some time with my friends. Then I'd cut out and I'd go up to the library and I'd take a look at Rolling Stone. And I want to read what was going on with music. So I liked reading the articles, and I liked that component to it, that you could learn more about the artist, the new album, and so forth. And the writing in those magazines was good. Even the rock rags, Hip Parader and Circus, the style that they wrote when they were talking with a band about a new album or a new tour really wasn't that much different than the same approach I took at the Times Leader years later.
Wow, that's cool. So you just kind of you learned. I mean, you went to school for it.
No,
no,
went to school to be a school teacher.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I taught Wyoming Valley West mostly as a substitute school teacher. You usually have to sub for a couple of years to get a teaching job, because there's a lot of people that like to be teachers, and people get those jobs, as you probably know, they stay there 40 years. I mean, you get a job if you're teaching at a school when you're 25. It's not unusual to see someone there 30 years maybe, because they could retire early. So you have to kind of wait your term. And I didn't mind. I enjoyed subbing. Teachers liked me up at Valley West. They would tell me. They would actually say, Alan, I'm going to be out tomorrow. I'm going to ask for you. Teacher would have jury duty. They'd ask me for the whole week. So I was working all the time. But I'd student for about 3 years, and I just kind of was like, I just wish I could get my life rolling. I don't know how long this is going to be. There was one woman who was a substitute, nice girl, qualified. She was doing about a year longer than me. So I figured, she's next. I'm 2 down the road. Around that same time, I start freelancing for the Times Leader. I don't think I've ever told anybody this story before, but so I was writing about rock music for the Times Leader and working a retail job, because there wasn't enough money to just sub and freelance. And I was subbing. I remember the one day I went into the teacher's room, the classroom, and they had the Times Leader open on the desk, and my article about some underground metal band that I had reviewed at the factory was on the desk, and I'm there in my suit and tie talking about, world history. So I kind of had this dual life. I love them both. And the Times Leader hired me first. I was interested in both. The Sunday Independent, do you remember that paper?
Yeah.
That closed in the spring of '93. Kind of suddenly. I don't think anybody even saw it coming. It was the Sunday newspaper in town. Sold tons of copies on Sundays, lots of ads. Just fold it. Times Leader already had a Sunday newspaper. It was second, but it was out. The Citizen's Voice didn't even have one. They didn't even bother. That's how big the Sunday Independent was. All of a sudden, the Sunday Times Leader circulation just went crazy overnight. It was the only Sunday newspaper in town. They got all those ads. They got all of those readers. They had jobs. They needed help. I came in as an editorial assistant, helping with the community news briefs, weddings, Sundays, the wedding section got huge. It's the only paper to be in now. So I did that, and that's how I started. And the ironic thing is I went to the interview at the Times-Leader. I never told anybody this before. And my father called me at Valley West. I was teaching. My father never called me when I was teaching at the school. Why would you? You know, I'm working, you know. But he called because he knew I was up for the Times-Leader job. And he just rang the classroom. And I didn't get a lot of calls. It was no big deal. You're allowed. You're a teacher. It wasn't like it was doing anything wrong. But he said, I just want you to know that Valley West called. Or I'm sorry, that the Times-Leader called. And I found out that I was going to go work at the newspaper in a classroom at Wyoming Valley West, where I was trying to get a job for 3 years. So,
yeah. And then you got hired somewhere else.
And I got hired to go somewhere else, and I found out at my high school, which is where I used to go and read all those rock magazines. So,
wow.
You know, kind of
full circle.
Yeah, it was real full circle.
Wow. That's really cool. So I mean, back to these interviews, you've done probably, I don't know, what, thousands of interviews?
Oh, yeah.
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 Are there any artists, musicians that you didn't get to interview that you wish you could have interviewed?
You know, there's like, I call them the big three. It's like the Mount Rushmore. I mean, some of the names, you said them, they're impressive. You know,
yeah.
Not impressive that I talked to them. Their work is impressive. You know, Don Henley or Steven Tyler, or Billy Joel. But I'm never going to get McCartney. I'm never going to get Bruce Springsteen. And I'm probably never going to get Bono. And those are the three that I would love to just talk to.
Why not?
About a new album. Well, they just don't do them. I mean, if they go on tour, they don't play arenas. They play football stadiums. And they don't need to do the press. It sells out. I mean, so they don't work it too hard. I mean, you'll see McCartney do 60 Minutes or Howard Stern. Bruce will do Rolling Stone every album. That's pretty much it. And so I can't see it happening. I don't even know if I even requested them. I got press tickets and credentials for Bruce and McCartney and U2 lots of times. I've covered their shows. I had nice seats from the record label or the publicist, or the promoter. But I don't even think I bothered to ask for an interview with those three guys. It would be a waste of a fax or an email.
Yeah.
Used to fax them back in the day, but email, it would be a waste of time. Probably.
Yeah.
You know, but there was some great experiences there with some of those artists. They were, you know, that's a question that people ask me a lot. Was anybody nasty or no?
Yeah. What was that like? You know, talking with these guys, hanging out with some of them.
Talking to them was cool. I mean, the surprising moments. The Billy Joel story I've told a couple of times, but I'm talking to Billy Joel. He was coming to Scranton. He was actually he did this cool Q&A thing at colleges for a couple of years. He was at Wilkes, and he was at the Scranton Cultural Center. I think I talked to him before the Wilkes show. I'm not sure. It was one of the two. And I'm on the phone with him. It's a week or so before the event, and we're having a great conversation. And I'm talking to him. That's one thing I always do. I always talk to them about why they're talking to me. You don't get on the phone with Billy Joel and start talking about Piano Man right away. I mean, you know.
A rookie move, right?
Yeah, it's just going to go down in flames. So you can work yourself up to it, though. I was talking to Alice Cooper once, and I wanted to ask him if he saw himself as the godfather of shock rock, if he felt that Kiss and Motley Crue and Marilyn Manson and everything was because of him. I wanted to ask him that, but I know he'd probably been asked that before. So I asked him that 20 minutes in. First thing I talked about was a new album, new tour. What are you up to? And what, you know, how's the tour going? Any different approach to this record than the last record? I see you worked with a different producer. I did my homework. And then you get some rapport with them. And then you can ask him anything you want 20 minutes in. So I was doing the same thing with Billy. And he says, hold on a second. I think, okay, maybe he's got to go to the bathroom for something. I don't know. Get a Coke, get a drink. I don't know. Whatever. And he goes, hear that? And in the background, I hear a piano playing clearly. And he goes, you hear that? He's genuinely excited about this piano that I'm hearing coming through my phone. And he goes, that's my daughter. I go, oh, really? He's like, yeah, she's getting her piano lesson. And I'm like, who gives her the piano lesson?
Who's doing that?
And he goes, oh, I have a guy come to the house. I want her classically trained. I'm like, that's funny, Billy. I go, the piano man, he doesn't give his own. And so we both laughed about it.
The piano man himself.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. And I wound up using that in my lead on the story. Bowie surprised me. Every interview I'd ever seen with Bowie, which was very little, very few, I just saw him as stoic. He's a kind of the thin white duke, and he didn't seem, the old 70s videos of Ziggy Stardust, he was this androgynous sort of, there wasn't a lot of personality there. There was a lot of color, and there was a lot of music, and there was a lot of visuals, but I don't know if you agree with me, if you ever seen those old videos of Bowie, but you didn't see any charming, laughing, delightful, funny guy, and that's what I got on the phone. And it was awesome.
So it was unexpected, but in a good way.
In a good way. It's up on YouTube. If you listen to Google Alan Stout, David Bowie, YouTube, Alan K. Stout, David
Alan
Bowie.
K. Stout.
You could hear it. At one point, I even kidded around with him because I said, you're always changing your image, your sound. You've always throughout the years kind of reinvented yourself. I said, you're almost like it. He goes, don't you say it. Don't you say it. I guess he got tired of being called a chameleon. And I said, oh, you're like a chameleon. And we both just start laughing. He goes, you said it. But he laughed it right off. He was awesome. So, yeah, stories like that. Steven Tyler, 1998, get on the phone, and we're talking for about 10 minutes. He goes, actually, I got to tell you. He goes, I'm Jones in here. And I said, what's up? He goes, I just found out we have our first number one. I Don't Want to Miss a Thing from Armageddon. They had lots of top 10 hits, top 40 hits, videos, iconic video, but they never had a number one single.
To that point.
To that point. He had literally just found out, I guess, about 10 minutes before I got out there. I don't even think he called his wife, children, other guys. His manager told him, and he had this interview to do with Alan Stout in Wilkes-Barre, and he was still excited about it. So I was like, wow, congratulations. And he's like, thank you. And that was kind of neat, to be maybe the first person other than maybe his manager.
Yeah, to know that.
To congratulate Steven Tyler on his first number. I just got lucky on that one, but
yeah,
memorable for me.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And any other really cool memories?
Just some of the, you're asking about people that remember you before. Like I said, John Bon Jovi, he actually did, and, wrote something on one of the things he signed for me about how we're both still hanging in there. Sammy Hagar, that's a funny story. I wrote a column about David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar, and I basically said that when they did the tour, which they did in 2002, I thought they were going to play on stage together. I didn't know it was going to be one open for the other, and that would have been the dream tour. And I put this set list together, and I also wrote, but if you really want to know, I'm more of a Sammy guy, and I kind of wrote all these things. So I didn't meet Sammy at that show. I didn't go backstage. I gave a copy of the article to the sound guy because he gave me a great interview, and it went all over the country on The Wire. And, hey, I'm Alan Stout. I did the interview with Sammy Hagar. Here's a copy. Can you just give it to him? I handed it to the guy at the soundboard. Oh, yeah, sure, buddy. Thank you. Forget about it. 2-3 days later, phone rings. Sammy Hagar. Alan, Sammy Hagar. Now, I'd already done the interview with him. He's like, where are you at? I remember I go, I'm sitting at my desk in the newspaper. He goes, no, where are you in Wilkes-Barre? I'm like, yeah. He goes, man, I wish I saw you the other night. Man, thanks for this article. This is fantastic. He goes, we got to hang out.
Wow.
So he goes, I'm in Hershey on Thursday. I'm in Camden on Saturday. You come down. We're going to do some shots. We're hanging. So Sammy Hagar called and says, hey, we're hanging.
Yeah, when Sammy Hagar calls and invites you.
Yeah, you're hanging. Yeah. So we go down to Camden because it was Saturday. We figured that'd be more fun. I'm not working anymore. I already covered the show. I already did the interview. We're just going.
You're hanging.
I told my editor about it, Joe Buckley. He's like, oh, you got to go. He was so awesome. I mean, we went back. We had the Cabo tequila that he endorsed at the time. It was his drink. We had some of that. We had some food. Then he was clearing the whole room out because it was time to get to the show. And so it's time for us to go. We're getting up to leave. He gives us a look like, no, you guys are okay. You guys sing. Then there was some radio contest going down there with one of the Philly rock stations where some of the fans got to be on stage during the whole show. He says, you guys, I could hear him talking to his manager. I want these guys up on the stage. So we watched the whole show from the stage. he says, he brings us all down to the front of the stage when he's singing Dreams. And so we're on stage in front of 14,000 people singing Dreams with Sammy Hagar. After the concert, my cousin and I are driving over the Ben Franklin Bridge, you know, the one that goes from Camden over to Philly, and they're doing those rock blocks on the radio where they play all the songs that were just at the it must have been YSP or MMR, one of those rock stations, and they're playing Dreams. And I'm driving, and I had a convertible at the time. It was a beautiful summer night. We're driving over the Ben Franklin Bridge. My cousin's sitting there next to me, and I'm like, dude, we were just on stage with Sammy Hagar singing this song in front of 14,000 people. We will never listen to this song the same way again. And he goes, no, we will not. that was like the exclamation point.
That's
on
really
the night.
cool.
Yeah, I never get to tell these stories because they don't come up in conversation ever. And probably not even some of my friends don't even know them.
Well, hopefully they'll listen to this. And,
maybe they will.
And I'm glad you came in today. I'm glad I was able to, share some of these stories and be part of sharing some of this history of what you've done. I think, you're incredibly talented.
Oh, thank you, Bill. And I want to thank you, too, because, a big part of my life for 9 years was working with Big Brothers Big Sisters over at Catholic Social Services, a program that is so wonderful. And you chaired the Bowl for Kids' Sake a couple times and helped us raise so much money for those kids. And you're a young man, and you came over there, and most of those corporate chairs were always guys that were 40s, 50s, and you're probably the youngest one we had, and you did such a wonderful job leading that campaign. And that was really where I first met you a couple of years ago. That's how I met first, and I'm always very impressed with you. And to take this podcast, I think podcasts are great. I mean, it gives people an opportunity to do something like this.
Yeah.
It's like in the 90s when everybody started making really good independent CDs. Great studio, great production, great artwork. We don't need a label. Do it yourself.
Yeah.
You would have had to get hired by a TV station to do this show 10 years ago. You don't need it anymore.
No.
I think that's cool.
Yeah.
You do a great job with it, and I've listened to your work. And
thank you.
Some of the interviews you've done, people I've known, Tony Brooks was one of them. Wonderful.
Thank you.
It's a great service to the community, too.
I appreciate that. And from one interviewer to another, how did I do?
Oh, wow. Well, you told me that you don't like to talk that much.
Yeah.
And so if you asked me a question, I would roll with it. But you made me feel really comfortable, made me feel welcome. And, we wanted to talk about the Agnes movie. We wanted to talk about some of the old rock and roll stories. It's still a part of my life with the radio show every week. Love what we do on the river. Great team of people there. Great radio station. To be able to talk about it was fun for me because I really don't. At home I'm just dad. I'm the corny guy who likes the old TV shows and says no a lot. Yeah. But obviously that part of my life is the most significant.
So how can our listeners connect with you and the Agnes Project?
The Agnes Project, if you email us through the Agnes Project, which is Agnes Flood 1972 at Comcast.net, I get those emails. So that's on the website, Agnes72.com. There's a contact there. For Music on the Menu, if you're a band that's looking to get some airplay, you can email me right through the Facebook page, and that's Music on the Menu with Alan K. Stout on Facebook. Send me a message, and I get them. Matter of fact, I even have it set up with an auto reply for information about how to send music to the show, because that's what all the questions were for. And so it'll come right to you in 2 seconds.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Alan K. Stout. No, really, this was really cool. It was a fun experience for me as well. So, Alan K. Stout on the Stacks podcast in the Blue Door Studio. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Bill.
If you'd like to learn more about the On the Stacks podcast, be sure to search the hashtag OnTheStacks on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. We'll catch you next time on The Stacks.